At just 17 years old, Mary found herself utterly alone. Without a mother's protection or any family to shield her from harm, she stood defenseless against the brutality of the man who falsely claimed the title of stepfather. What was once a place of comfort had transformed into her cage, the bindings dug mercilessly into her flesh. Burning pain radiated from her wrists as the rough rope fibers carved into her skin. Stretched against weathered fence boards, her legs trembled under the relentless heat of the sun bearing down. Pain accompanied each shallow breath she managed to take. Terror weighed on every beat of her racing heart. She was far too innocent to comprehend how her existence had spiraled into such horror. Too inexperienced to battle against someone who wielded years of dominance and rage as weapons. When she dared refuse signing away her property documents, his fists came down on her. When tears fell, he hurled insults at her soul. According to him, she held no value, merely an inconvenience. Without his presence, she amounted to nothing at all. His verbal assaults wounded her more profoundly than the restraints ever could. Physical violence left marks beyond her skin. It carved permanent damage into her very essence. Mary watched her innocence dissolve gradually, overtaken by dread and enforced silence. She'd mastered the art of concealing her pain, biting down until her lips bled, trapping her anguish deep within where no one could witness it. But today was different. Today, hiding proved impossible. Her desperate voice pierced through the stillness, crying out for rescue despite her fading belief that salvation would arrive. Though her throat felt like sandpaper and her words came out fractured, she continued pleading, gripping tightly to the thinnest thread of hope that perhaps someone might detect her distress. The merciless sun continued its assault. Perspiration mingled with blood across her damaged skin. The parched vegetation surrounding her seemed to murmur prophecies of doom. Her stepfather's presence haunted her thoughts, a constant warning that this torture would persist eternally, unless she surrendered everything her late mother had left as her inheritance. Closing her eyelids, she summoned memories of her mother's gentle expression. She recalled when the property felt secure, when happiness filled every corner. Those days had vanished, leaving only dirt, restraints, injuries, and the harsh mockery of a man who mistook her suffering for his triumph. Exhaustion racked Mary's frame. Her resilience teetered dangerously close to complete collapse. The land was being stolen from her grasp, her entire future erased before it could even unfold. An innocent forced into a realm of violence and hopelessness, imprisoned by one man's insatiable greed, someone who never truly belonged to her family. Her desperate pleas rang across the barren landscape, frightening birds from their perches. The breeze carried her anguished voice well past the property boundaries. But would her cries reach compassionate ears? Would they find someone courageous enough to confront the monster who held her prisoner? Mary's lips quaked as her final reserves of energy abandoned her body. She spoke softly toward the heavens above, a last desperate prayer for deliverance, uncertain if anyone existed to receive it. Her pulse quickened not from optimism, but from the horrifying possibility of being abandoned completely. The haunting question lingered, unanswered. If rescue failed to arrive immediately, how much longer could she endure in the clutches of someone determined to steal her property? Her dignity, and ultimately her very existence? The afternoon silence shattered with the rhythm of approaching hoofbeats. John Carter had been traveling across the arid terrain just another ordinary day beneath the expansive azure sky when an unusual sound reached his ears. Initially faint, easily mistaken for wind, but then unmistakable, someone crying out. Not an animal's call, but the genuine agony of a young woman suffering. John halted his mount, brow creasing as he oriented toward the sound's origin. That cry carried substance, a raw desperation no decent person could dismiss, not if any humanity remained within them. He urged his horse onward, moving carefully and deliberately. Dried grass crunched beneath each step, the atmosphere thick with floating dust particles and oppressive heat. Drawing nearer, his vision focused, and the scene materialized before him. Mary, a young woman bound viciously to fencing, arms secured, face streaked with grime and tears. Violence had marked her body. Betrayal had scarred her spirit. Momentarily, John's chest constricted so intensely he wondered if his heart might cease functioning. The frontier had shown him his portion of misery. He battled dangerous men, laid friends to rest, and witnessed destiny's cruel hand shatter families. Yet something about this situation struck differently. This wasn't a random outlaw attack or nature's accident. This represented deliberate evil. Detecting the horse's approach, Mary raised her head. Her eyes expanded, glistening with simultaneous terror and fragile optimism. Her mouth moved wordlessly, trembling. Through that shattered gaze alone, she begged for help. John dismounted and moved closer. The crimson bandana around his throat caught the wind as he knelt to meet her at eye level. His voice emerged gravelly yet unwavering. "You're protected now, young lady." "I'm here." Her shoulders convulsed, part relief, part lingering dread of what might follow. John retrieved his blade, the metal glinting in sunlight, and started severing the bindings. Each strand split with a sharp crack like shattering shackles. Mary flinched as circulation returned to her hands but suppressed any outcry. She refused to appear vulnerable before this stranger who'd already demonstrated more kindness than anyone had shown her in years. When the final restraint dropped away, John supported her with a steady grip. She leaned into him, her body shaking. In that instant he made an unspoken vow. No honorable person could simply walk away now, yet just as relief started settling in, the atmosphere itself seemed to pause. Because somewhere in the distance, a threatening presence still loomed, the kind that never releases its prey easily. Could this rescue truly mark the end of her nightmare? Or merely the opening chapter of an even darker battle approaching? The restraints had been removed, yet terror still wrapped around Mary like a second layer of skin. Her hand trembled as she attempted to stabilize herself. John kept his arm securely around her, guiding her toward his mount. "Take it slow," he said, his tone soothing, like addressing a startled creature. "Just breathe. You've survived, and he won't lay another finger on you. Not as long as I'm here." Mary desperately wanted to trust his words. Her lips quivered as she attempted speech, but only a whisper emerged. "It was him. My stepfather. He's after the ranch. He won't give up." John's jaw clenched. He'd witnessed avarice transform people into demons previously, but something felt especially corrupt about someone who victimized their own household. Looking into Mary's eyes, seeing the panic there, he felt his own anger ignite. "Hear me clearly," he stated. "Your isolation ends today? Whatever he believes he possesses, he's mistaken. That property belongs to you, and he has zero claim to it." Mary's tears overflowed not solely from fear, but from finally hearing the affirmation she'd yearned for. Someone had chosen her side at last. Don assisted her onto the horse. She gripped the saddle desperately, weakened but resolved to maintain her posture. With one fluid movement, John mounted behind her, steady and defensive. The horse began moving, transporting them both away from the fence. Away from Hank's shadow of cruelty, the journey passed quietly, interrupted only by leather creaking and hooves pounding. Mary leaned backward slightly, placing her trust in this man she'd just encountered, because intuitively she recognized he represented her sole opportunity. They arrived at the ranch house as sunlight began fading. Wooden planks groaned under their footsteps as John carried her inside. The interior smelled of accumulated dust and aged timber. But here at least she was liberated from the bindings. John positioned her gently, retrieved water, and tended to the wounds on her arms. His hands showed years of labor, yet his touch remained careful, almost paternal. Mary observed him, puzzling over why this stranger valued her safety more than the man who claimed family ties. Nightfall descended around them, quiet yet heavy with tension. Mary sat beside the fire, enveloped in a blanket. John leaned against the wall, alert and watchful, as if sensing the conflict remained unfinished. Because somewhere beyond, hidden in darkness, Hank still lived and breathed, and men of his nature never surrendered easily. The question standing before them was straightforward, yet terrifying. Would Hank return more dangerous than before, or would frontier justice finally hold him accountable? Before discovering what unfolds next, make certain you click that subscribe button to catch the continuation of this tale. And while you're settled in, pour yourself some tea, get comfortable, and share in the comments what hour it is in your location and where you're watching from. Darkness blanketed the ranch heavily, bringing warmth but no peace. Mary remained close by, clutching her blanket tightly, her gaze still clouded with dread. John positioned himself near the entrance, arms folded, his ears attuned to every external noise. He understood men like Hank well. They never simply disappeared after being humiliated. Return was inevitable. Predictably, the stillness shattered with footsteps crunching on gravel. Then the ranch gate groaned open. Slow, intentional, Mary's body went rigid, her breathing trapped in her throat. John's hand moved toward the weapon at his waist. The door shook violently as Hank's voice ripped through the darkness. "You can't keep her from me, stranger. That property is rightfully mine, along with everything it contains." Mary's eyes brimmed with tears. But this time she refused to shrink away. She rose to her feet, trembling yet defiant, her voice emerging from depths she never knew existed within her. "You're a liar. Mother left it to me. You'll never steal it." "Not ever again." The door exploded inward. Hank charged inside, his eyes wild and bloodshot, his hands balled into weapons. Intoxicated by fury, he lunged toward Mary, but John intercepted him, his presence solid as an oak barrier. The two men collided, fists connecting with flesh, boots grinding against wooden boards. The table crashed sideways, the lamp swayed violently, shadows dancing chaotically across the walls. Mary pressed herself into the corner, her heart hammering as the battle unfolded before her. Hank threw a powerful punch, but John evaded it, delivering a blow that sent Hank reeling backward. Still, Hank surged forward again. Driven by greed and wrath, John's age showed in his weathered features, but his power remained intact, his determination unshaken. Every strike he landed wasn't merely for Mary, it represented every innocent person who'd suffered under men like Hank. The violent struggle rattled the modest room, until eventually John overpowered Hank, forcing him to the floor. The firearm skittered away, and the fight became purely a test of will. John's voice emerged low and cutting. "Your reign ends tonight. You're finished in this place." Mary moved forward, her legs unsteady, but her eyes burning with newfound strength. She gazed down at the man who'd made her life a nightmare and spoke with a power he couldn't shatter. "You'll face consequences for your actions." Not answering to me, not to him, but to proper authority. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in Hank's expression because he recognized the reality. In the West, a man might flee his adversaries, but justice eventually catches everyone. The question remaining was elementary. Would frontier law finally force Hank to face his reckoning? Or did he possess one final desperate move? Morning arrived gradually across the ranch, splashing the sky with amber and crimson hues. Hank no longer represented the dark presence that plagued Mary's nights. With John standing beside her, the county lawman rode out and placed Hank under arrest. The proof of his brutality, the visible injuries, the neighbors who'd witnessed her suffering, and his own rage-filled outbursts spoke more convincingly than any defense he could manufacture. For the first time in countless years, Mary experienced the burden lifting from her soul. The restraints had vanished, the terror had fractured, and in their place emerged something she hadn't experienced in ages. Hope.Wrench existence didn't transform into simplicity immediately. Fields required attention, fences needed repair, and certain nights the quiet still brought heartache. But she no longer embodied a victim's role. She'd become a survivor, and she had John, the man who positioned himself between her and annihilation. The man who demonstrated that justice still existed in the West. John remained at the ranch temporarily, assisting her in restoring what had been damaged. He instructed her in confident horsemanship, accurate marksmanship, and most importantly, how to face fear while standing tall. Mary, once a terrified 17-year-old, gradually transformed into a woman radiating strength and determination. She wore her scars with pride, not as symbols of humiliation, but as evidence of her endurance. Time moved forward. The ranch began flourishing once more. Mary administered it with capable hands, astounding even herself with her competence. Throughout everything, John stayed nearby, observing her emergence from her traumatic past. Their connection strengthened not hurriedly, but with time's steady patience. What started as appreciation evolved into a quiet, lasting love. This wasn't storybook romance. It proved stronger. It was forged through pain, through adversity, through the fundamental truth that two spirits can discover each other even in the most unforgiving territories. And when Mary's smile finally returned, it carried both grief and happiness. Smile declaring she'd been shattered but never destroyed. Now consider for a moment. How many among us have confronted our own version of Hank throughout life? Perhaps not someone with physical violence and bindings, but the burden of cruelty, greed, or treachery. And when existence seemed impossible, did someone intervene to remind us we weren't abandoned? Mary and John's narrative transcends being merely a frontier tale. It serves as a reminder that genuine strength isn't born from comfort, but from surviving adversity and discovering courage to rise again. It demonstrates that justice might require patience, but arrives if we maintain our stance. And most significantly, it reveals that love can flourish even in despair's barren landscape. If we refuse to surrender it, if this narrative has resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next shared story. And now I'm curious, what would you have done in Mary's situation? Would you have resisted, or would hope have abandoned you? I'd genuinely appreciate hearing your perspective in the comments. Before concluding, I want to address you directly, those listening at this moment. I'm genuinely thankful for everyone supporting this channel through viewership and thoughtful comments. I do review them, and I've observed that numerous viewers watch these narratives very late into the night. I want to remind you to prioritize your well-being. These videos exist for your enjoyment, for those peaceful moments when you can unwind, not to steal your necessary rest. So, if the hour is late wherever you are, I hope you'll power down the screen and get proper sleep. I also feel I owe an apology. I recognize I don't engage with you as frequently as I should. The reality is I'm advancing in years, and after extensive hours producing these videos, exhaustion often sets in. That's why I'm more careful with my own health nowadays. And that's precisely why your health matters deeply to me. Thank you for remaining with me, for listening, and for participating in this journey.